Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 28 minutes and counting. T-minus 28. Our propulsion test with the Gemini spacecraft is in progress at Launch Complex 19. We're testing those small 25-pound thrusters that ring the adapter section of the Gemini spacecraft. We test out these thrusters in the modes in which they would operate in orbit. Those are the modes that are used to maneuver the spacecraft in orbit. The sequence goes as follows. We apply a yaw left, a pitch down, a yaw right, a pitch up, and a yaw left. This gives a good test of these thrusters. The test is in progress at this time. It's being monitored by astronauts Jim Lovell and Buzz Aldrin in the spacecraft and the crew in the blockhouse. In the meantime, with the Gemini launch vehicle itself, we are making one of the final checks of the malfunction detection system of the vehicle itself. All is going well with this test also at this time. Now coming up on T-minus 27 minutes and counting, this is Gemini Launch Control. Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 20 minutes and counting. T-minus 20, all still going well at this point. We have completed our testing of the orbit attitude and maneuvering system, the propulsion system of the Gemini 12 spacecraft, and it appears to be very satisfactory. In the meantime, the flight director, Mr. Glyn Lunny, has informed us here at the Cape of the time he wants the Gemini launch vehicle to ignite. That is T-minus 0 in the countdown, and the time he gave is 46 minutes and 30 seconds after the hour. We'll get liftoff about 3.2 seconds or so after we get the ignition. So our liftoff will be 3 seconds after 30 seconds after the hour. This will mean a hold time at the T-minus 3 minute mark in the count of about 3.5 minutes. To repeat, we will have a built-in hold at the T-minus 3 minute mark in the count. The duration of the hold about 3.5 minutes. Aiming for an ignition time or T-minus 0 of the Gemini launch vehicle at 46 minutes and 30 seconds after the hour. Our window in which to launch, that is to make a third or fourth revolution rendezvous, will end at 48 minutes and 53 seconds after the hour. So our complete window goes from 46 minutes and 30 seconds after the hour to 48 minutes and 53 seconds after the hour. Our checks are continuing in the blockhouse of Complex 19. They all appear to still be going well at this time. Now at T-minus 18 minutes, 24 seconds and counting, this is Gemini Launch Control. Gemini Launch Control, T-minus 14 minutes and counting, T-minus 14. With the Agena spacecraft in orbit, now just traveling over the Earth south of Hawaii, we are continuing our count here at Complex 19. All systems still are go. The launch vehicle test conductor has just made a status check with all the various recovery elements, the recovery forces that are in the immediate Cape area, and these Department of Defense forces primarily all report that they are ready for the mission. Coming up will be a data link test of the guidance system of the Gemini launch vehicle. This is between the ground guidance and the vehicle itself. We also had the launch vehicle test conductor confirm that we will have a built-in hold at the T-minus 3 minute mark in the count. The exact time of the hold to coincide it with the launch will be 3 minutes and 29 seconds. The countdown then will be resumed. We'll be aiming toward a T-minus 0 or ignition of the Gemini launch vehicle at 46 minutes and 30 seconds after the hour. Liftoff will come about 3 seconds thereafter. Now T-minus 12 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. This is Gemini Launch Control. Gemini Launch Control at T-minus 9 minutes and counting. T-minus 9, and all aspects of the mission still looking good at this time. The Agena 12 spacecraft in orbit now southeast of Hawaii as it starts to make its approach toward the west coast of the United States. Our latest ephemeral data, that is the apogee and perigee of the Agena spacecraft, gives us the following numbers. An orbit of 163.6 by 159 nautical miles. To repeat, 163.6 by 159 nautical miles. A period of 90.48 minutes, 90.48 minutes. And the Agena has an inertial velocity of 17,294 statute miles per hour. This data will be applied here at the Cape and from the computers in Houston to give us the proper numbers for the guidance system of the Gemini launch vehicle and the spacecraft computer. The final update will come just after we resume our countdown after the 3-minute hold. Under this launch plan, we'll be launching on a flight azimuth of 100.6 degrees. At this point in the countdown, all still going well. Astronauts Jim Lovell and Buzz Aldrin have been advised to close in and lock their visors. They have reported this is completed. The spacecraft test conductor informed them that they were all set and wished them a good flight. Both pilots expressed their thanks. We're now at T-minus 7 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. We will have a built-in hold, a planned built-in hold at the 3-minute mark in the count. We will hold for 3 minutes and 29 seconds in order to coincide our launch with the now orbiting Agena. This is Gemini Launch Control. Launch Control at T-minus 6 minutes and counting. All systems still going well. We'll be coming up in about 3 minutes into our built-in hold. Major highlight occurring at the blockhouse at this time, a final status check of all aspects of the mission. The crewmen are now reporting back go as their various systems are called out. All systems still functioning normally at this time. The Gemini 12 spacecraft now is on complete internal power. About 2 minutes ago, it went on the power of its fuel cell system within the spacecraft itself. The final go will be given by Mission Director Bill Schneider, and his turn will be the last one after he hears a report from all the other elements. The status report is still in effect at this time, and all are reporting go. Now T-minus 5 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. This is Gemini Launch Control. Launch Control, we're at T-minus 2 minutes and counting. T-minus 2, all systems still go with the Gemini launch vehicle and spacecraft at this time. The launch vehicle and the spacecraft have received the proper updates, that is, the proper parameters for flight. These were, the final versions were fed to the launch vehicle and spacecraft just after we resumed our countdown at T-minus 3. Coming up at this point, just a matter of seconds from now, the launch vehicle will go on complete internal power, that is, its own battery power. Our countdown will continue down automatically to the 0 mark when those 2 engines in the first stage will ignite. When they build up some 77% thrust, the vehicle will be released for flight. We'll have a total of some 430,000 pounds of thrust with the launch vehicle on the pad. Now T-minus 1 minute and 9 seconds and counting. Another key test during the final phases that was just completed was a final test of those engines and the guidance system, in which we actually gimbal those engines, a final test of swinging them to ensure they respond to the guidance system. Coming up on 50 seconds. Mark, T-minus 50 seconds and counting. The crew in the blockhouse now monitoring their consoles during these final phases. All reports come back good at T-minus 40 seconds and counting. T-minus 35, the pre-valves now have been opened to permit the propellants to come down toward the chamber. There's only one valve left, which will open at 0. T-minus 25 seconds and counting. T-minus 20. T-minus 15 seconds and counting. It's quiet in the blockhouse as we continue to monitor at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have ignition.
And we have liftoff. Liftoff is approximately 46 minutes, 36 seconds past the hour. The roll program has gone in, which twists the launch vehicle over to a launch azimuth of approximately 100.6 degrees.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have ignition.
And we have liftoff. Liftoff is approximately 46 minutes, 36 seconds past the hour. The roll program has gone in, which twists the launch vehicle over to a launch azimuth of approximately 100.6 degrees. Are in the sync. Now the pitch program has begun. This will pitch the vehicle over to horizontal flight in a gradual manner to put it into a launch window of some 87 nautical miles high.
Gemini 12, Houston, Capcom. We have about 1 minute to Kano LOS. Your Vox is going 5 by, and Buzz, will you confirm that you can see stars in the daylight? Over.
Negative, I won't really confirm that. It looked like there were stars when I lit that up, but closer examination, there's so much moving away from motor vehicles. Hate to say it, but it appears to be going up.
Understand. Now 1 minute.
It may be going another direction too, however. That would be the way that I'm looking for it now.
Understand.
I think I mistook that for
Copy.
Fast Terminator now. Okay, can you look back and see how we're at? Gemini Control, Houston, we've just had loss of signal over Kano at 19 hours 42 minutes. Our heart rates at the start of our EVA ran like this for Command Pilot Jim Lovell, 85, for Pilot Ed Aldrin, 92. Respiration rates for the Command Pilot was 15, and for the pilot, 18. Very shortly, the crew will be heavily involved in their S-13 experiment. We will shoot first at Gamma Cassiopeia, which is in the northern sky, secondly at Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky visually, and the third field will be Gamma Velorum down in the southern part of the Milky Way. They will use the grating attachment for this experiment. At this time, we have the tape ready for our pass over Canary, and we'll play that tape for you now.
12, Canary Capcom, standing by. Roger, Captain, keep fast. Exercise completed. Lifting. All right, you look good down here. Okay, flight, Canary. Say again, Canary? I say everything's looking real good. Both suit pressures are up. The two pressures hold good. Roger, about to send in some summaries. You're on the line. Okay, we have Canary from flight. Go ahead, flight. Send us a Bravo, Gemini. Bravo, Gemini. Okay, we're in Fox now. Please do get us and can't miss the dipole. Okay, so it's going to be on fast 13. All set and the lights are checked out. Okay. I'm watching your attitude, sister. It's really something. Yeah, we're going about north now, aren't we? Stars right behind us. I believe I see stars all around us. Sure it's not 30 plus? Stars in the daylight. I don't think so. Oh, wait a minute. That one star with that waist pouch there, yeah. Canary from flight, send us another main. Gemini. Roger. We've got some of the timer cord hanging around the, yeah. What's the air dump? Stand side. Hey, from flight, Agena, Charlie. Looks like I might have to pull some of that stuff away when I get back to the adapter. Evaluate status dynamics. Okay, I'm just drifting here. It looks like I have a small tendency to float out, but very little. I'm completely free. To push myself away and to see what to bounce away from the hatch. Seems to be any tendency at all to want to leave the hatch. Quite one of those washers. See some particles coming out of the cockpit, but they don't seem to be pushing me out. Imagine this.
I think you'll see a little later and more, and we'll cover in more detail some of the finer points of the EVA. I'm sure you're all aware that things went quite well, and of course we were very well satisfied with the progress of the EVA. As a matter of fact, things went quite a bit smoother than I had actually thought that they would. We had to anticipate many, many problems that could arise, and it was just through continual training and going over these procedures that we were able to learn what these pitfalls might be and how to avoid them. And I might say that we didn't run into a single problem that gave us any particular trouble. I'd like to contrast in a way the preparation for EVA, contrasting that with training that's required for launch or rendezvous or reentry. In these other phases of the mission, I think we've been able to establish simulators and create the situation very accurately. And each flight crew coming back has reported on how closely the simulations agreed with what he actually found in flight. Now, extravehicular activity is so entwined with the zero-G environment, and of course it's impossible to do this, set this environment up here on the surface of the Earth. So I think EVA was an example of a phase or a particular portion of a mission that we just had to go up into space to find out what the situation was and what techniques were really required. I think we have, since some of the early work in EVA, discovered that the training afforded by underwater simulations is going to stand us in very good stead in the future. I was quite happy to find out that the dynamics, the behaviors, the situation that I was confronted with in space was very well duplicated in the simulations that I had on the ground. I'd like to stress that the work that we did and what we were able to accomplish in EVA was the result of a vast team effort We made use of all of the experiences of the previous crew members on previous flights. Our support team spent long hours preparing the mock-up, and we certainly spent a considerable amount of time going through EVA preparation. During the flight, we had 3 periods of EVA, 2 stand-up EVAs where I was using either just the spacecraft hoses or an extension hose, and the other EVA was an umbilical EVA. We decided to place one of the stand-up EVAs first, primarily to afford me an opportunity to become familiar with what it was like to be standing in the open hatch and to push against it gradually, and just to see how much my body would move, to get exposed to the environment of the vacuum. And I'm quite glad that we did schedule a stand-up EVA first. During this first period, we were primarily concerned with taking pictures at night of various star fields. In the day period between the 2 night periods, I used this to familiarize myself with the zero-G environment. What I was doing during this day period was recovering a micrometeoroid experiment that was attached on a retro adapter behind the cockpit. I mounted the camera that took some of our pictures, and I did this several times just to become familiar with this task. What I was trying to do was to store up a knowledge of how things behaved when I was on this short hose configuration, so that I could compare this with the situation that would exist on the second EVA, the umbilical EVA. I noticed one peculiar thing during one of the night passes while I was using the shutter release cable, and I think we might want to look into this a little bit and find out just what caused it. While I was rubbing my fingers together, I could notice in the dark a very faint glow between my fingers, and it was very interesting to observe this. The umbilical EVA was divided essentially into 3 phases. A day phase, a night phase, and then another day phase. This was spent, the first day phase was spent up in the Agena area, after in the area of the hatch, first mounting the camera several times to compare this with how I had mounted the camera on the previous EVA. I then moved up to the Agena area and made use of the waist tether restraint system that we had devised. This consists of 2 flexible tethers that were attached to my parachute harness. I connected these hooks into 2 different rings. One of them was on the telescoping handrail that I had installed, and another one was on the docking cone of the Agena. And with this restraint system, I was able to completely ignore where my body was going, because I knew it wasn't going very far, and that I was going to be able to devote my full effort to the work task that I had. This first work task was to take the tether that was on the Agena and hook it up to the docking bar of the spacecraft. And this worked extremely well. And then I put this hand clamp above it to keep the tether down lower. I then moved the restraint, the waist tether restraint system to a new location and deployed the micrometeorite experiment that had been placed on the Agena, the S10 experiment. I didn't experience any particular difficulty doing this, so then I moved the waist tethers to a new location and started to prepare the workstation that was on the Agena so that I would have more time to devote to this when I came up after the next night pass. As time moved on, I then started moving back toward the adapter and handed in the camera to Jim and picked up the camera that I was to use back in the adapter workstation. Back in the adapter, we had rigged up back there several different connectors and hose connections and hooks and rings, just basic tasks to be done, not necessarily to say that these were important tasks, but to evaluate the restraint system that we had established back there, these foot restraints, or golden slippers as they're called. And I'll say that there really is nothing better than this type of a restraint system. The situation is very similar to just being in 1G environment. The only difference is that the things that you're working with your hands tend to move around in a way that they don't in 1G. After establishing that these foot restraints were as good as we had hoped that they were going to be, I then took my foot out of these and did some work on the waist tethers back there. The next day pass was spent up on the Agena using a torque wrench to see just how well the waist tether and the 2 feet, I'd hook up the waist tethers. This would give me a 2-point support, and then as I would push my hands against what I was working with, my feet would come in contact with the Agena, and this gave me a very excellent 4-point of contact. And with these 4 points, I was able to counteract any torque forces that were created by any particular work task that I was doing. To summarize what the lessons of what I think we learned from our EVA on this flight, first I think we learned the great value of a restraint system. In order to perform a task in EVA, we first must take the time to set up a restraint to the body that will substitute for the 1G that we have down here where our feet are in contact with the ground. We have to fix the body in a position where we can then devote our entire effort to the task at hand. The second lesson that I think we learned concerns the value of the underwater training that we had. This was extremely valuable to us in letting us go through the entire timeline of the EVA mission. The third lesson that I think we learned was that sincere and intense training and very close attention to equipment familiarization really pays off in these type of efforts, and there's just no substitute for very close training. I think Jim wants to talk about the eclipse now.
The fourth lesson I learned was the fact that sometimes I was working harder in the cockpit changing film and voice tapes than Buzz was outside. One of the good examples of the flexibility that our program has gotten into in Gemini with 12 was the fact that we were unable to go to high altitude with our Agena, so we substituted the eclipse. Now, the eclipse had sort of been forgotten about since we had a launch delay of 2 days, but we were able to phase the spacecraft Agena combination such that we could meet the umbra of the eclipse, the total eclipse, just at the right time. Now, this is a very difficult rendezvous, and again, I have to take my hat off to the ground personnel who computed the rendezvous, gave us the proper maneuvers to do this. I had on my side a very almost opaque gold filter, which I could see the round circle of the sun, and it was my job to track the sun through this filter as we came up to the eclipse. Just as the time was approaching, I could see the moon, which was a dark disk, come across the limb of the sun and start to occult it. I thought at first that we were really going to miss it because it appeared that the moon was a little bit lower than the sun and that we would never get a total eclipse. But as we approached this position and we approached the time of totality, suddenly the complete window became black, and in an impulse I ripped off the filter and looked out, and I could see a black disk against a sort of a black sky with a brilliant ring around it of the corona of the sun. And just for a few seconds I took a look at the total eclipse, and I knew that we had indeed completed the rendezvous. Shortly thereafter I put the filter back on, and soon this very brilliant spear of the sun shining through from the other side of the moon had taken place. It was quite a beautiful sight. Just prior to the flight, the backup crew came over to me and said, Jim, you know who you're flying with? And I said, I think I do. My compatriot knows quite a bit about rendezvous. He has a doctorate in the science of related subjects. And they said, you better not buzz this one. So just briefly, I'd like to explain to you just what went on in our rendezvous. I thought it was quite interesting. You're looking at the Earth, and from the North Pole, Cape Kennedy's here. The Great Titan booster put us into orbit. We made a slight adjustment burn to get us in a good orbit. Came around. Buzz and I were very happy about this time because the booster performed so perfectly. Pete Conrad gave us a burn to adjust our orbit at this point. We came back around again. We got another burn from the ground here, and then Buzz did some onboard computations to make our altitude difference between the target, which is the red dotted line, about 10 nautical miles. Everything was... Go ahead, Buzz.
I might say that these calculations between that CSI point on there and the CDH point were based primarily on the range indication that we got from the radar, and it turned out to be extremely accurate.
We were extremely fortunate also because we turned the radar on early and we had a solid lock on at some 235 miles. We were led to expect before the flight that this range was highly improbable and it would have a much shorter range. So you can imagine our confidence and elation as we tooled around just waiting for the rendezvous to take place. After our maneuver at this point, we are getting set for our final maneuver down at the terminal phase initiation for the final rendezvous, when Buzz noticed that the computer wasn't given any change of range. And I had looked down at the little green light that tells us that we have a radar lock on, and it was off. And for a minute there, both of us just looked at each other. We said, oh no, it can't happen to us. Anybody else or any other time, but gee, not this time. But suddenly it dawned on us that sure enough our radar had indeed failed, and we went to the radar backup procedures, which we had practiced quite a bit in our pre-flight training but really never expected to use. The first thing on my list, it said acquire the target visually, and I looked up there and I couldn't see a thing. Buzz took out his trusty sextant, which had an 8-power scope, and put it up to the window and spotted the target. And I looked up again, and that speck on the windshield turned out to be the Agena. So we bore sighted on the target, and the rest of the rendezvous is more or less history. It was successful. And now I'm sort of glad that we had a radar failure because it gave us an opportunity to use the backup charts that all the crews have been practicing quite a bit, but have not really utilized.
Yes, I'd like to stress this is the first and only time that the primary rendezvous has ever been accomplished by use of backup techniques. All of the crews have become quite familiar with the procedures, and we've gone over them at the McDonnell simulator many, many times. But this is the only time that they've actually been used. And I might say that the solutions that we got were extremely close. I actually think that the maneuvers that we made were more accurate than those that were given to us by the ground. The subsequent corrections that we made after the initial transfer maneuver bore out just how accurately this initial maneuver was.
Another exercise which we had done, which it was sort of started on 11, and they had laid the groundwork, and we tried to find out more in the knowledge of this particular exercise, is one which I think that both Buzz and I can talk about. It's the tether exercise. We had the task of doing a gravity gradient type of exercise, which utilizes the differential gravitational attraction of two bodies in a vertical position above the Earth in attempting to stabilize these bodies in a vertical position. It's actually a matter of station keeping without using any fuel. And I might better explain it if we have these models. About this time, we had a little thruster problems, as you might know. Both 2 and 4 thrusters were out, and every time that I wanted to pitch up or yaw, I would roll. And it really got to be quite frustrating. I got mad at it occasionally because I couldn't do anything. Every time I wanted to do something, I'd always roll. But we finally, through a learning curve, determined how to handle this situation by using a maneuver thruster, actually beeping a little bit to bring it around and counteract this roll. As we separated from the Agena, we had actually placed it in a vertical position, and we separated the Agena. We were a little worried that perhaps that the control system might give us some trouble, but it didn't. And the tether just played itself out, and we came on up to this position. Now, in our practice down at the Cape, Buzz was going to control attitudes, and I was going to control translation. And the idea was to maintain this position, and as soon as all the rates had stopped, we were going to let everything go and see if indeed the gravity had captured us in keeping this position going around the Earth. Well, our first attempt at attitude control was very poor, and we decided to leave attitude go and we'd just try translation. And occasionally the tether would disappear, or the Agena would disappear completely, and the tether then would loop around, and we were sort of worried that perhaps we'd get a tangle on an antenna or something of this nature. But this didn't occur. And as the daylight wore on and we got to nighttime, we heard Houston call and say, "You have 3 minutes tonight. Do you want to stay with the tether or don't you?" And after some discussion among us, we said, "We'll give it a try." So we went on to the night period with the docking light on, the tether shining very brilliantly. We could see the Agena now, and slowly but surely the tether tautened up, got tight, and we thought at first that we were indeed captured. But as the night wore on, the Agena slowly came up to the horizon, and we were in a very, very slow spin. So the next day, we gave it another try, brought it back up again, Buzz getting the slide rule out, making a few fast calculations. And we again got above the Agena, maintained this position, and it appeared to us now that our rates had indeed dampened. And we left it go for the next 2 revs, and finally we let the Agena go too, and there we were, 2 dead vehicles captured by gravity in a vertical position going around the Earth.
When a gravity gradient is established, you should end up with a periodic oscillation back and forth. And the situation we were faced with initially was that we were in rather poor position to determine just how much velocity we should put in. To give you an idea of how much what the tolerances are, it's on the order of 1/4 of a foot per second accuracy is required at this stationary point in order to keep the vehicles from tumbling all the way over and starting a spin. As the period or the amplitude of this motion gets larger, the total time period also increases. And this is why it wasn't until near the middle of the night pass that we discovered that we were approaching this position where we would go unstable. If we hadn't have maneuvered at this point, we would have definitely gone into a very slow spin and gone down below the Agena. So we had to take some action at this point. I might add that initially the tether was quite loose, and occasionally we would bounce against the end of it. I was very surprised at how quickly, and this was 10 to 15 minutes, the tether seemed to damp out these oscillations and gradually assume this taut position. We'd been led to believe beforehand that this might take several revolutions before this would happen. We made this one maneuver down here, and it wasn't a very clean maneuver because we didn't have good attitude control. We had to select which thruster we could fire to get the system moving back in this direction. And then as we came across the top, Jim says, gee, we look in great shape. Let's just leave everything the way it is. But I pointed out that if we didn't make a maneuver right at the top, we'd just find ourselves right back over in this condition about at the end of another orbit. So I talked him into tweaking it a couple of times right up about in this area. And the next time we reached the maximum amplitude, it was about 40 to 50 degrees in this direction over here. We just left it that way completely with the Agena still having its attitude control system. I might add that the dipole was coming out here, and it gave us a very good reference system as to which way we were going in orbit. Our attitude was moving around considerably at this time, and just by looking down and judging from where the dipole was, we could get a very good idea and keep track of the progress of our position. I think you'll see this rather clearly in some of the films. At the end of, well, we had a total of 3 orbits that we were doing this, and during the last revolution, we released the Agena's attitude control system, and it started a slow roll and started some gradual pitch oscillations, and it became much more difficult for us to see just what our position was. It seemed as though the total amplitude or total swing tended to increase after we'd released the Agena's attitude system. You want to talk about how we fired and separated from it?
It was quite interesting. We had a lack of control, of course, so we tried to look around for it after we had separated. And we made a swing around 360 degrees, maintaining a level attitude because we were a little bit dubious about our roll. We couldn't see it. The Agena we knew was just around us, but we looked all over and we just couldn't find it. So finally we had gotten into position to make our separation burn, and just as the time reached to the 0 point, I looked over my left window, and sneaking out of the void was this tether. And I looked way over, and there was the Agena, but we cleared it nicely. We had some humorous times, things to keep us going and make life interesting in the 4 days. I guess I'm sort of a jinx against delta P lights, these lights on fuel cells. When Frank and I were up for 14 days, we had some little trouble with these lights, and they were on continuously. And in the spacecraft that we had, the lights were moved over on the right-hand side. Frank never did see them. They were hidden behind him, but I saw these 2 little yellow lights for the entire time. On this flight, the engineers had moved the lights more into the center of the spacecraft, and for 4 days, and I had moved over to the left-hand side, so for 4 days, again, I saw those 2 little yellow lights looking at me.
They were more on the right side than the left, though. They bothered me more than they did him.
We had known that we were a little bit short on water. This was one of the items. We had plenty of water in the reentry vehicle and here, but our adapter water was just right for the 4-day flight. And they said that we might have to go into our reentry water. So on the 4th day, as I was filling up my food bags, after Buzz had already completed putting all the water in his,
There's a race to see who got to the water gun first.
I had a package of dried up applesauce, and I put the gun in, and sure enough, nothing happened. And I looked at it for a while, and I put it in my mouth to see if any water would come out, and nothing happened. And I said, Buzz, I think we're out of water.
We've got a very busy flight plan today, so without any ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Siemens, the Deputy Administrator of NASA.
It was the 23rd of March, 1965, exactly 20 months ago, that the Gemini 3 gave this country its first two-man flight with a three-orbital mission. Since that time, and including Gemini 3, we have had 10 flights. These flights have given this country a tremendous amount of experience in manned exploration of space. We have learned how to maneuver in space, including rendezvous and docking, and after docking to still further maneuver with the propulsion system with the docked Agena. We've learned how to live in space and to operate in space with men and to carry out scientific and technical experiments. More recently, we've learned not only how to operate from within the capsule, but how to operate outside the capsule in a free condition, which has proved to be more difficult than we'd anticipated, but as a result of this last flight of Gemini 12, we now much better understand how to plan our extravehicular activities for the future. Let's remember at this time that Gemini is just an opening chapter in our long-range plans for manned space flight. This first chapter, of course, was exceedingly important to get behind us and has well laid the groundwork for DoD and NASA missions to follow. I'm referring, for example, to the Manned Orbital Laboratory of the Air Force and the Apollo Saturn program of NASA. Lest we get too optimistic at this time, let us also not forget that we have had our difficulties with Gemini. Even on the last flight, we had 4 of the 16 thrusters fail. We had trouble with the propulsion system on the Agena. We had 2 stacks of the fuel cell give us difficulty. Let us also remember that when we entered the Gemini program, we had the advantage of existing hardware and existing teams of people. We drew very heavily on the Mercury team, that is the NASA McDonnell team. We drew very heavily on Air Force and contractor teams and the work that was done on the Titan II, on the Atlas, and on the Agena. Let us also remember that the missions ahead are exceedingly complex. We're going to explore out to distances of 250,000 miles. The missions include, of course, the flights around the moon and the landing on the moon itself. So, as we listen here today to the magnificent accomplishments of Captain Lovell and Colonel Aldrin, let us not forget that there is much, much hard work ahead before we can say that we have attained our national goals of preeminence in space. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Gilruth, Director of the Manned Space Flight Center.
Thank you, Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference is the time specifically allotted for the astronauts to report on their flight. Detailed engineering, scientific, and medical results from all the Gemini flights are to be reported in a special conference at a later time. In my remarks, I would make only this very brief observation. Of the 10 Gemini manned flights, each one, in its own special way, has added new knowledge and has helped pave the way for the next. Each time, it has seemed most difficult to surpass the previous performance. Yet each time it has been done. I have been well aware of the high standards of skill, devotion, and courage required of each crew member in this series of pioneering flights. I have been thankful, as have all of you, for the successful completion of each mission. For Captain Lovell, this is his second space flight. For Colonel Aldrin, it's his first. Both men are worthy of the anchor position they have played as pilots in this last of the Gemini series, Gemini 12.